anything which will help liberate and strengthen the life of the individual, that will have full approval of Sri Aurobindo, the Mahayogi of 20th century. Because India in her heroic times of greatness and expansion not only valued these ideals of complete freedom to blossom to one's full potential, but also tried to put it in practice to whatever extent possible. He also said in the same interview that many of the practices that we see today, many of the social customs, norms, conventions that we have seem to have inherited over the last 400, 500, 600 years or even maybe 1,000 years or so, came about in the time of when the country was in that self-preservation mode. There was a need probably for these practices to keep women secluded, for example, or to keep women sheltered, to keep women under the protection of fathers, brothers, husbands, or sons in later age. All these may have had some utility, Sri Aurobindo said, because the society was in that self-defense, survival mode. But if India has to move ahead, grow and expand herself inwardly as well as outwardly in its socio-economic, cultural spheres, it has to get rid of those forms and practices that imprison. Again, going back to what Nalinikant Gupta once had said, that the very revolt of the woman, which kind of started this whole women's movement or feminism, if you will, that very act of revolt of a woman is a cry of her soul for freedom. How will soul blossom if there is not full freedom? But again, the question comes, freedom for what? Freedom to be like a man? Freedom to act like a man? If a man or a boy, a young man is pursuing some self-destructive activities, should the girls in simply the name of freedom pursue that just because that's the cool thing to do, that's the hip thing to do? So freedom also has to be understood in a deeper way. Freedom to do what? Freedom to work on one's own development, inner and outer. Development of the outer instruments through right education, through right training, right preparation, and the inner freedom. In this context, let's also bring up this idea of how does a man or a woman feel a sense of freedom? Freedom is actually more of an inner quality. As long as we are enslaved to some idea of what my life should be like, we are in some sort of bondage. Mother, the spiritual collaborator of Sri Aurobindo, had said something very profound in this regard, that men and women, in the context of man and women relationships, she said that they are quite enslaved to each other and despotic masters to each other. And she said no law can liberate a woman unless the woman herself inwardly finds that inner freedom. She also talked about how men are also in some sort of bondage, in some sort of slavery to certain ideas of domesticity, having a nice domestic life, also slaves to sexual instinct. Women, she said, could also be enslaved to the idea of getting married, having to the idea of motherhood. These are the reasons often that bring a man and a woman together. These are all conventional ideas that have to be rethought much more deeply if both a man or a woman have to walk towards the inner freedom. So the women's freedom or the freedom of women to blossom, laws can help, reforming social practices can help, outer contexts can help, but only to a certain point. We have to go back to what I said in one of the earlier videos, that the problem of feminism or the problem of women's freedom, the problem of gender equality is ultimately a spiritual problem. The pursuit of freedom is ultimately an inner pursuit. So these are certain things that must be kept in mind when we look at the situations or problems or issues that come up in man-woman relationship, in contexts like marriage, in contexts like workplace, educational contexts, and all these things. So how will we go back to the greater ideals of the past, or what does that mean for the greater ideals of the future? Let's just take the example of man, woman, and marriage. So yes, as I mentioned earlier, the woman was supposed to be the Sahadharmani, the one who walks with the husband in the pursuit of dharma. But maybe the time has come for the woman to also first and foremost find out who she is, what her individual dharma is, what her swabhava and swadharma is, so she can get that sense of complete being, that sense of, I'm a complete being within myself, and a whole person within myself, and then worry about, finding another partner in life with whom she can grow beyond that. The ideals of Sita and Savitri might still be relevant. The essence of those ideals might still be relevant, and yet new ideals might also be needed because contexts are changing. For example, we don't have the luxury of joint families anymore. We don't even have nuclear families often living together, especially with, husband and wife living in two different cities, commuting frequently for their professional commitments or other commitments and things like that. So this puts a lot of strain on the relationship. Again, should we go back to the old ideal that once a marriage is there, it is for life? Or should we follow the path of the West where there is no sanctity left to marriage? Or is there another way to understand? These are some things that we will take a look at in our next video. Thank you.